Hello, story seekers. I'm Nico.
I'm Ben, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
For this episode, we're joined by an award-winning editor and writer based in London. His short stories have appeared in various anthologies and magazines, and in 2018 he was nominated for the Shirley Jackson Awards, which were established to celebrate outstanding achievements in the literature of horror, the dark, fantastic, and psychological suspense.
His most recent work as an editor, Heartwood and Mythago Wood Anthology, has been shortlisted for Best Anthology at the 2025 British Fantasy Awards.
We would like to welcome Dan Coxon.
Hello, Dan.
Hello, how are you guys?
Very good, very good.
Yeah, I think so.
It's quite hot here. Is it hot there? Maybe it's just I'm in the attic. We have a very hot attic, but I should probably be trying to cool off.
Yeah, it's lessened a bit for us, I think, but we're both in Cambridge now, and we've had a sort of few merciful days off from the heat. Obviously, this will be coming out in September, but for people listening, this is actually recorded in July, so that's why we're talking about the heat.
It'll probably still be a hot September as well.
Yeah.
That's what we had last year.
Our last few episodes do feel a bit time capsule-y because we always say it's really bloody hot and we're recording.
We've both regularly come off the mic and just been sheeted in sweat from how hot it gets.
It's rotting.
Obviously, you're trying to soundproof a room. Obviously, you're in your attic, but like for us, we're in these like small rooms deliberately that have blanketed for sound, and there's just nowhere for that body heat to go in an already hot house. You're just turning into a melted popsicle.
You've just insulated yourself, essentially, haven't you?
Yeah. No sound out or heat out. That's the rules.
If either of you stop talking at any point, I'll just assume you fainted.
Yes.
Just
Finally,
the ground.
a terrible case of the vapours, you see. So, Dan, I'm going to ask, because we've got you on mic, how does one anthology, what is the process of putting so many stories in one place?
Well, interestingly, we are actually working on a book that's going to come out at some point next year on exactly that, on how people edit anthologies and how you put one together. So I have been thinking about that even more than normal lately. And I think the answer is that nobody knows, essentially, is what we've come down to. We've got lots of wonderful advice. Lots of wonderful advice from different people, but there is no one answer. And actually, even looking at what I've done, every anthology I've worked on, I've kind of worked slightly differently. So it's very much a kind of tools for the job at hand. I mean, the one you just mentioned, Heartwood, the Mythago Wood Anthology, that was absolute, not a nightmare because I love doing it, but it was one of the most difficult things I've done and gave myself literal migraines over it. But we got there, and it's quite good. I'm happy.
At this point, I'm going to cop something, and I want you to tell me how bad it is from your estimation. I have not read Mythago Wood. I have a copy. I have not read it. I'm aware that it's this like seminal core piece of literature for this genre. For some reason, it's just that information has never translated into an action for me.
I am prepared to just sit here while you read it. It's probably going to make for the most exciting podcast, but I feel like it would be a good use of your time. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And if anything, the sequel to it, Lavendis, is even better, which just never happens. But those two together, Mythago Wood and Lavendis, just absolutely blew my mind when I was about, I want to say like 16, 17, I think, when I first read them. Maybe more like 15, 16. The thing I love about it, it's kind of in a nutshell, because there's many, many things that I love about it, but the thing that in a nutshell that I love about it is the fact that it is a fantasy book, but it also kind of crosses into other genres a lot. There's a bit of science fiction in it. There's quite a hefty dose of kind of folk horror in it. There's even a bit of kind of nature writing. You can also just read it as a straightforward love story. There's just so much going on, and it feels massive. It feels kind of like an actual piece of mythology does. And I just love it. Yeah, I just love it. And, in order to work on the anthology and to make sure all the stories fit and everything, I read it very closely again and the sequel very closely again, and actually made up a glossary of terms from all of the books in the series, which is included in the back of Heartwood, just because I wanted to get it right. And just, the more I immerse myself in it, the more I realize this is just an incredible piece of work. So I hopefully part of the idea behind the anthology was that it would get people reading it again. Not that it's necessarily fallen out of currency, but I kind of feel like, it's something that people should be picking up and reading. In the introduction to it, actually, Michael Moorcock says that he feels it is one of the best works of fantasy, if not the best work of fantasy of the 20th century. So it's like, Michael Moorcock says that, you've got to read it.
Yeah, behold that man. So that was a shit joke. Anyway, yeah, I mean, you had some amazing people in there. Some of people who have actually come on this podcast before as well. Like we know RJ Barker really well. I think Adrian Tchaikovsky is.
Adrian's in it as well. Yeah, he's in it as well.
It seems like a really talented bunch that you got together. So that's really.
It's really interesting. So a lot of the people who wrote for it actually knew Robert Holdstock. I never met him.
Oh,
partly because I kind of feel like we were kind of a different generation, and by the time I was kind of like thinking about writing and working on anthologies and things like that, he'd already passed away, so I never had a chance to meet him. But there were quite a lot of people, some of whom were actually quite good friends with him. Maura McHugh was good friends with him. I think it was Lisa Tuttle was good friends with him as well. So it's actually nice to have them working on it as a personal project as well, I think, and you can kind of tell from the stories that people are kind of emotionally invested, not just in their own story, but in just kind of revisiting his work in that way.
Gosh, that's lovely. What a loving tribute that could be, but also like a really exciting creative endeavor as well. That's just sounds very cool all over.
Yeah, and I kind of think as well that, I mean, even if you've not read Mythago Wood, I think you can read the anthology. We've had a couple of people review it who hadn't read Mythago Wood and actually said there were probably some things they didn't get, but they actually still really enjoyed it just as a series of fantasy stories. So I kind of feel like, it can be a kind of a gateway and an entry point for people who want to approach Holdstock's work as well as kind of, something new for those who liked it first time round.
Well, so that one's Heartwood, a Mythago Wood anthology, which you can obviously order wherever you can order books. But for this episode, we're actually all writing to the same prompt, aren't we? This is the prompt for this episode is linen as the fabric. And Nico, I think you need to roll your bolt of cloth out for us first.
It will. Linen. Marjorie had ironed and folded all the sheets, with the meticulous care she always afforded them. She had done so because it was Wednesday, and Wednesday was always the day on which she did the linens. With the care of a master craftsman, they had been pressed free of every crease and folded into neat, even squares. Tuesday, she had washed them, and because the sun shone at this time of year, hung them in the garden, for Tuesday was the day for that undertaking. She preferred the summertime because it meant you didn't have to stand up the wobbly racks and squeeze past them to get to the loo. The tumble dryer didn't work anymore. John had said he would fix it some 10 years ago. John had said many things 10 years ago, but not one word in the decades since. With the practiced arm of her years of experience, Marjorie took up the basket filled with still warm folded goods and carried it up the stairs. Each one she took 1 foot at a time. Gone were her days of marching up them, replaced by this ponderous trudge. At the top of the stairs was the airing cupboard, where the sheets must go, swapped with fresh ones, so that the cycle may begin again. As she opened the door, and the soft, rich warmth of the boiler washed her mottled hands, a voice spoke at her side. This was odd, because no one was meant to visit her on a Wednesday. "Marjorie, I am afraid you are out of time." The voice was dreadful, in that it inspired dread, but it was without cruelty or joy. "Am I? Is Countdown on?" Countdown was what was on after Marjorie put away the sheets and changed the bed and made her sandwiches. It shouldn't be on yet. "I do not know," the voice offered. My business is not with Countdown. Marjorie put down her basket and turned to look at the visitor. He was waxen-skinned and wore about him a great shabby robe. What have you done to your dressing gown? Were you doing the garden in it? It's in a state. Give it here. He'd never been asked to disrobe before, but a grandmother's voice is one of authority, and so, at her behest, he pulled off his dark robes. Give them here. I do the wash on Tuesdays, you know that. I'm not best pleased. It is Wednesday. I am well aware. I'll have to do another load. Put a jumper on and your slippers. You'll catch your death standing there in your underwear. With that, she toddled off and began her descent of the stairs, each one taken as its own mountain. He did not wish to argue. It was not in his nature, so he went to the place where the clothes ought to be. The dresser was heavy with dust, and the drawer opened with a dry creak. He dressed simply, in a cardigan and slacks, and slipped his feet into a pair of grey and moth-eaten carpet slippers. When he had descended the stairs, feeling odd in this unusual garb, he found Marjorie making a fuss in the kitchen. Is cheese and pickle all right for your sandwich? I've not got enough corned beef for both of us. He had never had a sandwich before, so he nodded. It is impossible, even for the unknowable and endless, to stop a nana from providing food, even if you have eaten just before you arrived. As he knew all things, he knew this. It might be a while for your dressing gown because you've not sorted the tumble dryer out yet, hint, hint. She spoke as she moved around the kitchen, never once pausing to remember where anything lived. It was in her nature to make sandwiches, and sometimes, if she felt naughty, to open a bag of crisps and have half of it with them. The tumble dryer. Yes, it's still broken. If you'll just sort it, we could have everything done on the Tuesday, and then we could do something else on a Wednesday. He thought a moment. What should you like to do on Wednesdays? Oh, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. A plate, decorated with simple flowers, was placed on the table, adorned with a sandwich. The bread slices were thick as paving slabs, and near matched by the layers of butter and cheese between them. Sit down, dear, you make a terrible door. He sat, for he was asked. Go on, eat, I'll make mine now. He ate, for he was asked. The bread was dry, and the cheese cheap and soft, but there was an unmistakable element to it. Love. It occurred to him that it was in all of the things she had done. It trailed from her like vapour. Where is your tumble dryer? It was muffled by the first gift he'd ever been given. A sandwich. Well, I haven't bloomin' moved it. It's in the side room. He stood then and moved to view it. It was, in his most expert of opinions, dead. He had met a great many mechanics, engineers, and brilliant minds. None could have returned this ancient machine to rumbling, rolling life. When he returned, Marjorie was gumming her sandwich. Deep nose breaths filled the otherwise silent kitchen. It is broken. Yes, dear, I know that. Can you fix it? No. She threw her hands up and gave an exasperated sigh. He finally admits it. I should write this in the calendar. He could not help but laugh. It came from his belly and was hoarse and deep. I am sorry. It's fine, love. Marjorie, it is time. Oh, you're right. Come on, we can eat in the front room. The kids aren't here. We'll only be a bad example to one another. With a chuckle, she stood and took her plate. On her time-worn hands, it seemed as though she carried a great stone tablet, so heavy did it appear. He followed her, and she led him to a room filled with old brown furniture, every surface adorned with a doily. She plopped herself into an armchair and reached for the remote. Dutifully, he sat next to her and watched with some wonder as she lit up with enthusiasm. He did not know the game, but it soon came to him. She was bright and brilliant, and asked him with each round if he had any words. "I do not." "Come on, you're being rubbish at this. You're brilliant at crosswords. Have you gone daft?" He did not think he had gone daft, but he was not watching the letters and numbers. He was watching her. Many old women, he knew, did not acknowledge him when he came. Some, it seemed, evaded him far longer than they ought. Too stubborn to go with him, too busy, too capable, too solid. "Oh, I am tired," she said, when the adverts began. "Yes, I should imagine so." "It's a bit early for bed, though. I don't want to go to bed." He could not feel sadness, but he felt something for her then, as the love welled in her with nowhere to be spent. Silently, he offered her a hand. "I have fixed the tumble dryer," he lied, "so we can do something else on Wednesday." "Oh, well done, love," she beamed. "What shall we do?" "Anything that you want." She took the hand. Death stood, taking her with him, and began to walk her from the living room. "Where should you like to go, Marjorie?" "I don't mind. I don't feel so tired anymore. Oh, let's go to the park where we used to have our Sunday picnics before you hurt your chest." "The Sunday park? On a Wednesday? Quite adventurous." "Yes. I rather fancy an adventure." As they left, Marjorie did not look back to see herself in her final sleep in her well-worn armchair. "Then I shall see that you have one," said Death. "Yes. On Wednesday, I shall have adventures." And from then on, she did.
Lovely. Really nice. Very nice.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, really enjoyed that.
I am glad. I nearly caught myself at the end there. I'd written too much of my own older ladies in my life in there. It got
Yeah, I think
sort of lost in it.
it did. That did shine through. Like one of my grandmothers was called Marjorie, and she was like that. So that felt very personal and nice
Yeah.
to hear. Obviously, also there's the huge Pratchett homage there. I think.
Yes.
In particular, I got like Reaper Man vibes from it.
Yeah, I could see that.
I think, with sort of death
It's
dressing like normal clothes and things like that.
it's very difficult to write Death as a massive Pratchett fan
Yeah,
because it slides that way quite aggressively.
yeah, that whole like anthropomorphic voice, like the deep voice is just a winning combination, isn't it? That's just
Yeah.
it's just so well done. I also got another Pratchett reference, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the bit where you say his voice was dreadful, as in it inspired dread.
Yes.
That's a bit like the start of Lords and Ladies, I think, where it's like
Yeah.
elves are terrific, as in they inspire terror.
Yes.
Yeah, lovely.
That one was a direct homage, so
Yeah,
I'm glad that one
that's almost a
The,
reference. That one.
I thought that line I thought that line worked particularly well with you reading it out, I have to say.
Yeah.
With the voice was dreadful.
Yeah, 1 out of 10, never again. No, I really specifically didn't want Death to be a skeleton. I think in an attempt to avoid the the Pratchett death, but I sort of accidentally landed on the Seventh Seal, sort of Ingmar Bergman, Pale Man, who would then later return in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. But
Yeah.
I think it's Death is an interesting character to depict because obviously it's such a constant for the mortal that we've seen him in in so many guises that I think there's some comfort in one that you can immediately recognise.
Yeah. I think one thing that really shone through, like the sort of the Pratchett stuff aside, and the personification of death aside, you captured the Sisyphean task of the washing, carved in stone tablets, really, really well. Like, there's just, I mean, I don't know what this is like for you, Dan, but just like every fucking week, it always surprises me that there's more to do, and it oh my god, I hate it.
I did think actually that I should probably be handing this story to our 13-year-old who does actually read Pratchett, so it'd probably be quite suitable for him. But just as like a guide to how to do the washing, because he has no idea of the effort that's involved. I don't think he just kind of throws stuff on the floor and it magically appears clean a few days later. So I think he should read this for no other reason than that, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's very well captured. The structure of like the whole week being structured around the washing. It is initially brutally sad for like negative reasons, I would say. You sort of as a reader, maybe you're thinking like, oh, this really isn't much happening in this person's life. But yeah, it became somewhat delightful. This kind of like well deployed mise en scène of the old lady. The beautiful crockery, the doorstop sandwiches, the doilies, that sort of like you drilling down and illuminating and showing the humble brilliance hidden in that kind of like humdrum life.
Yeah.
Like her being good at the game show stuff and things like that. And that built really nicely. I felt like the pacing on that was really good as it built to him talking about how some people are like too busy, too capable, too solid to like be able to be like take them easily at the end. And it felt like a good death. It was just a really like heartwarming piece, despite the fact that it's about an old woman dying alone, having lost somebody. Yeah. So obviously we've talked about Pratchett a lot, but it also reminded me of a movie called Meet Joe Black, which is a Anthony Hopkins and Brad Pitt flick from a long time ago.
Yeah.
My brain thought of, is it Mighty Joe Young, the one about the gorilla? I was like, wait, what's he about to fucking say?
Drop a bomb on this story. No, it's like that kind of idea of like death living with you for a little while.
Yeah.
That's it felt like a different kind of a story that's been told before, but executed really well. Like all the nice little bits of it, the turning points in the story were all done really well.
Gritty detail as well. I made a note on gritty detail that I also made a note that just said corned beef ! Because it was things like that. It's like, I don't think anyone of a current generation even necessarily knows what corned beef is, but it was exactly the right thing for her to be making and someone of her generation to be making. And it was just those little details that kind of really brought her to life, then made it so much more poignant, I think, when it comes to the ending.
That's a really good take.
Definitely the platonic ideal of a nan. I think, especially for people around our ages. This, I think one of my favourite things that went in there was if she felt naughty having half a bag of crisps.
Yeah.
Yes, I made a note of that as well.
Knowing that I, as a full-grown adult, will open what they laughably refer to as a sharing bag of crisps and accidentally smash the entire thing watching a film.
Just inhale it, yeah. I'll tell you one thing about that corned beef that struck me. She says, is cheese and pickle okay for yours? Because I've not got enough corned beef for both of us. That's actually really well observed, because the way that I would have been tempted to tell that would be like, he gets the corned beef because he's like the guest, and maybe there's some gender politics involved as well. But actually, that's not the way around that it actually is. Like,
no,
she's got her plan. She's going to stick to it. That's what old ladies do.
Yeah, she's having a corned beef sandwich.
Yeah,
You
she's
just
having a
happen to be here.
Okay.
You're having cheese because there isn't enough corned beef. I liked it. I thought it was well observed.
I did have one other note, which
Go
was
on.
kind of actually a question for you of sorts. So obviously, I mean, the thing that I really liked about it, and one of the things I really like about Pratchett and other kind of comic fantasy, is that kind of friction that's set up between kind of having a fantasy trope up against kind of gritty reality, kind of everyday reality. And there was one point when you describe her as carrying the plate like it was a stone tablet, where I kind of felt like it had almost flipped and crossed over, and that was almost like a fantasy trope way of describing her carrying the plate, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I didn't know if that was intentional, that you wanted her to be. It kind of came at a point where she was almost about to leave and go with death, and I kind of that in itself felt very poignant to me. That the plate was like a stone tablet, which is almost her leaving that everyday gritty realm and starting to move into something else. I was just intrigued if that was intentional or if it just kind of slipped out.
So it's one of the few times that it's described as from Death's perspective, and that's the sort of heavy thing he would know.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
The ancient tablets, as he wouldn't say a bowling ball because he doesn't know what a bowling ball is. I don't think. Or maybe he does.
I really like that as well. Though it gave kind of a gravitas to it, I guess, in what was in many ways, quite a not necessarily a light story, but it was quite a funny story, and it wasn't like a deep soul-searching style of story, but it kind of gave a real kind of like gravitas to that scene. I thought personally,
it's a lovely comment actually, and I will also say once again, I must apologise to our American listeners for at least half of the things in my story. I'm so sorry. They're really. Really British touchstones. They will mean nothing.
Also, corned beef is a really different thing in America. I don't know how well you know kind of food actually in America. I lived in America for like 5.5 years, and it's just nothing like what we call corned beef here. It's entirely different. Entirely different.
Is theirs
it's
nice?
It's much more like kind of like pastrami or something. It's
okay.
it's more like a salt beef. But quite often cooked like in a large chunk and then kind of sliced up, not the weird like processed mottled looking thing that we get.
For our American friends, imagine if Spam was made by using shotguns to fire brisket into a tin. That's what corned beef is.
Oh gosh, lovely story. I think it's just.
Thank you.
It's nice. It's really nice. Two final things from me. I think that we're just this. The line "Love trailed from her like vapor" was really nice. I thought really lovely moment. There was also a line about no one was meant to visit her on a Wednesday, and that felt very real. That kind of like these unwritten rules that if you transgress with a grandmother, you're gonna fucking find out about them, and it's not gonna make any sense to you up until it's explained to you rather loudly. And then the final one, which this is a really common like bit of feedback from me, and I think it might be because like I lean towards like sometimes like clipping stuff off rather too brutally, but I think you ended it a sentence before you ended it.
Okay.
Like that might maybe Dan should weigh in on this one, but like I felt like there was a bit where I think you said "and she did" was the end of the line, and that felt like it was it. And then I think there was another line after that.
So I believe the last line was from then on she did. But I think you're right. It could have ended on yes. On Wednesdays I will have adventures. Could have been.
That was it. Yes, that was
yes.
Been the end.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of lopping the last line off of stories. I just did that in an edit on an anthology that I'm working on with a fairly big name writer last week. He did turn around and agree that it was better without it. I was going to feel slightly embarrassed if I'd got it wrong, but yeah, no, I'm a big fan. Sometimes the thing is as well, you can just take it off and see what it looks like, and if it doesn't fundamentally change anything, I'd probably leave it there, I guess.
Yeah.
I make you right. I agonised over the last few lines of which one of these is the end. So you're right. I liked them all and couldn't make a decision, so I left it all there. And maybe I shouldn't have.
That's the Peter Jackson approach to ending.
Yeah. A New Line Cinema Return of the King did, my friend.
Oh gosh, well, that was delightful. Good feedback as well, Dan. Are you ready to give us your story?
I am, yes, I think.
Great.
Said with such boldness.
I just want to make sure I'm not going to suddenly sneeze into the microphone, but I think we're good. Linen. In many ways, the Spectrum Park Hotel was unremarkable. The main building may once have been a school or a retirement home, depending on who you asked. The annex was a prefabricated block that resembled nothing more sophisticated than a giant porter cabin. Even its location, squatting on the edge of the Norfolk Brecks, seemed to have been chosen with boredom in mind. There were no town centres within easy reach, no attractions other than the flat, characterless scrubland of the heath itself. You had to drive to get there. It wasn't unusual for guests to check out early. This seclusion and boredom had appealed to Patrick when he applied for the job. His life had strayed off the rails for a while, and now something ordinary felt just like the tonic he needed. The guests could be annoying, and sometimes he had a little too much time to himself, time in which his thoughts would often swerve back to the way things had ended between him and Claire. It was fine, though. He was fine. There were 10 minutes left of his shift when Sandra asked him to check room 282. Sure, he said, draining the dregs of his coffee. What am I looking for? She told him the guests had complained at checkout. The room was too cold, there had been noises in the night, the bathroom stank of shit. 282 sat on the far end of the annex, so Patrick found it hard to believe that it was noisy. The other two seemed entirely feasible. There weren't 282 rooms in the Spectrum Park Hotel. There were only 46, and 3 of those were closed for refurbishment. The rooms in the main building were assigned numbers in the hundreds, while the 200s belonged to the annex. For some reason, the numbering there started at 250, then skipped from 262 to 274 without explanation. Patrick assumed they'd intended there to be another wing at some point. 282 was as high as the numbering went, so it was quite a trek, through the glass tunnel with its views of a weed-tangled lawn out back, down the first corridor in the annex, then up a short flight of stairs, doubling back into an identical corridor running in the opposite direction. By the time he reached 282, Patrick was out of breath. He swiped his keycard 3 times before the light changed to green and the door clicked open. Pushing forward, he walked into the room. 282 was essentially the same as every other room in the hotel. Beige carpet and walls, grey fittings. The bathroom was officially brushed slate, but this was just grey too, with an off-white suite and a grey and beige striped shower curtain. It did, he conceded, smell slightly of shit. There was nothing they could do until the plumber came out next week, so he sprayed some magnolia mist from a can beneath the sink. It was as Patrick turned back to the bedroom that he paused. The bedsheets in every room were white on white, often stained when housekeeping stripped them, then bleached back to pallid oblivion before they returned. It left the sheets and pillowcases stiff and slightly ragged, more than the few displaying frayed edges and holes big enough to slip a finger through, but at least they were clean. These, however, were different. It wasn't that the sheets were dirty. Quite the opposite. They were startling white, as if no one had slept on them at all. At least, they might have looked that way, if they hadn't been tangled and twisted into a thick rope that stretched the length of the bed. At the foot of the bed, nearest to where Patrick stood, the tangle split in half, 2 separate cords heading in opposite directions. At the other end, it terminated in a large knot, as if someone had wrapped the sheet round and round, bundling it into a ball, or a head. Patrick paused, his mind still muddled from lack of sleep and the fumes from the aerosol. He'd thought, in the moment, that a person was lying there. He could see his mistake. It did look like the outline of a person, didn't it? The head resting on the pillow, arms tucked to their sides. When it moved, rolling over and extending one cotton corner towards him like a beckoning hand, Patrick screamed. He bolted through the door without looking back, and only once he'd put the entire corridor between them did he stop to catch his breath. Leaning against the banister, he looked back down the narrow hallway, half expecting something to come stumbling out of the room after him. But there was nothing. Not a sound. Taking slow, deep breaths in through his nose, Patrick clung to the handrail as he made his way back downstairs. It was Sandra who explained it to him, after she'd made him a cup of builder's tea so sweet it was like syrup. "You found yours, then?" she said matter-of-factly as he sipped at his drink. "My what?" he asked. Sandra just shrugged. It turned out he wasn't the first to have discovered something in one of the rooms. They all had them, from the cleaning staff to the guy who came to service the aircon. If anything, Patrick was late to the party. Nobody knew exactly what they were, and each manifested in its own way, but they all filled a need, somehow, as if the hotel could read your innermost yearnings and make them real. It took him 2 days to muster the courage to revisit room 282. They'd had guests in there since, a professional couple taking a well-earned break from their teenage children, but they'd reported nothing unusual. Patrick waited until they checked out. Then he steeled himself and walked along the annex's long corridors until he reached the door. He touched it with the tips of his fingers, stroked the laminated wood, half considered turning back. Then he swiped his keycard and stepped inside. After that second visit, Patrick started making regular trips to room 282. Daily at first, then 3 or 4 times per shift, each time emerging flushed and tongue-tied, seeming unaware of where the last 45 minutes had gone. They covered for him at the front desk, of course. They all knew the pull of the hotel's strange revenants. If he needed a little time to get it out of his system, that was fine. It was practically therapy. By the 3rd week, though, they'd often see him waiting in the foyer, watching for the room's current occupants to go out for the day. Before their car had even left the hotel grounds, he'd be striding up the corridor, eager to be back behind that closed door with whatever the thing was that had manifested on the bed. He even gave it a name. He started referring to her as Claire. 4 of them confronted him on a Sunday afternoon. His shift didn't start until after lunch, and they had gathered at reception, ready to head him off before he could sneak through to the annex. Sandra was the nominated spokesperson. It had been a problem for a few staff members in the past, she explained. Most of them could control the urge, take what the hotel was offering and accept it as a way of moving on, a balm for their wounds. For Patrick, well, he went the other way. There must be unfinished business in his past, she said, trauma weighing on his soul. For many it was therapy, but for him, it had become an addiction. Patrick didn't tell her the details of what had happened between him and Claire, the real Claire, the source of all his shame. The way he'd behaved when she'd started to pull away, the anger that had boiled over as they drifted apart. He didn't tell any of them in the end. It was all too raw, and part of him was aware that once they saw him that way, he could never take it back. He did agree with them that something had to be done, though. At night he'd started dreaming of a woman made of sheets, tangling him up in her folds, wrapping warm cotton around his mouth until he woke stifled and gasping, unable to breathe. One evening, Sandra helped Patrick strip the bed in room 282. Then, together, they carried the sheets out to the lawn at the back of the hotel, piled them in a heap, poured on some cooking oil from the kitchens, lit a match. Scraps of burning linen danced like fireflies in the gloaming for half an hour, and Patrick watched them, occasionally wiping smoke from his eyes with the back of his hand. When it was done, and the fire had died, he left the ashes for the rains to wash away.
Good Lord, that was fucking great. Loved
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah, really interesting. You got so much in there. Like
Yeah.
the verisimilitude that you built, was just done so elegantly in the observed little details that it felt like time just melted away. It was really good. I like that.
That was the struggle for me, was fitting it into the 1500. It literally hits 1500 almost on the dot.
Yeah.
It flowed so cleanly, it felt like about 300 words.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's so... talking about verisimilitude, right at the start, talking about the strange numbering in hotels, I was
Yes.
thrown to every travel lodge I slept in as a travelling musician. So you're in 412 and you're in 294, and then you're somehow opposite each other completely inexplicably. And I was so immediately that all the description, saying it was as though even the location had been chosen with boredom in mind. Just all set the scene so perfectly for it to be a complete rug pull when something very strange did then happen.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I did try cutting some of those bits. I tried cutting the bit about the room numbering and stuff, and I just couldn't. It didn't work without it. It needed it, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it was a real highlight for me as well. So I think that was the right move to leave it in.
The line about the we were talking about the different complaints, and the last one being "and the bathroom smelled like shit" that's a cracking joke, by the way. Absolutely brilliant.
And obviously built so that you could then call back and say he conceded it did smell slightly of shit. Like that got an actual laugh, like an out loud laugh from me. So I think that works really well too.
I wanted a bit of humour in there because I'm aware that my stories can be a little dour at times. So when I'm reading one, usually if I read at conventions or anything as well, I'll try and pick one that at least has got like a laugh somewhere.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it gets a bit much, I think, after a while.
I always have at least one note that I feel must be shared. And my note on this one is he fucking the sheet?
I wrote that down too.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we don't know, you see. I figured it was better not to show that in particular. I should leave that to your imagination.
Well, thanks for that. But yeah,
my lovely pristine white sheets.
Well, that was the other thing that I was about to mention was some people don't like Hemingway, and I get it. I do like Hemingway, but like I'm not saying that you had that sort of like overly machismoed vibe or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But the way that Hemingway has like short sentences that are just really to the point and move the story along, and like there's a lot of stuff like implied in the action. You were doing a bit of that, but then what he does is that he'll then build to a truly beautiful, complex sentence. And there were 3 or 4 of those at least in that story, and one of them was about these stained sheets being bleached back to pallid oblivion. Loved it. Really liked that one. The other one that I wrote down of that kind was watching the burning motes of linen dancing like fireflies in the gloaming. Just it ramps into poetry, but without losing that reality that we said that you built so carefully. Really nice style. Like, congrats.
I think I tend to lean towards kind of slightly poetic endings for some reason. I don't know what that says about me as a person or a writer, but I do kind of feel like I quite like that kind of moment of I don't know what it is, that kind of like poetic turn of phrase at the end that just it gives you kind of a nugget to end on, but something kind of emotional to end on as well, I guess.
I think it feels like a kind of rhetoric, doesn't it? These sort of rhetorical devices. I think
leaving
somebody with an image, this like beautiful image, well constructed and well built to, I think it does leave a lasting impact on a reader. And I would say that you achieved that really well there. Delightful story, really good. My actual version of the is he fucking the bed was is he fucking the linen monster, and I was referring to it as a linen monster throughout because I felt like you had some really strong horror tropes going on, like the hand moving is a classic one.
It's interesting looking back on it actually earlier today when I kind of was kind of revising and doing my homework for this. Looking back on it again, that there is only that one real moment of kind of anything fantastical in it, isn't there? When he turns around and sees the sheet move on the bed. Beyond that, we don't see anything. It's just all him in the hotel.
Yeah, we don't see anything, but I guess we do get this implication from everybody. The people in the hotel, like, she explained it to him. Like, they've normalize something that is not normal, and there's a part where he's like losing time, like he couldn't say what happened in that 45 minutes, things like that. I found it to be deeply unsettling, but somehow, like, even though maybe Patrick's a bit of a wrong un maybe, but it felt like the narrator was a good sort, if that makes sense. You managed to straddle that line somehow, and I can't quite see how it was done, but it was really clever. It's like watching a magic trick. It's lovely.
I'd say writing it. The main problem I had was fitting it all in, and it's partly because I tend to do this thing in stories now, and I have been for a while, where what sometimes in the past would have been like a twist ending, I kind of try and place in the middle of the story instead, and then kind of examine what happened afterwards. So there probably was a version of that story that just ends with him seeing the sheep move and running out screaming from the room. But instead, I wanted to examine what happened afterwards. But I just felt like I almost didn't have enough time. I kind of felt like the last half, I don't know, felt a little rushed to me. I would have liked to have spent a little more time in there, I think. But that's just me as an editor picking my own stuff apart.
Well, this comes up quite frequently for us on the pod because we set this limit, which is reasonably hard at 1,500. Like people do blow past it sometimes, and that's fine. But 1,500 isn't really the limit on a short story word count. It's sort of not even close to the starting point, is it? Like between 2 and 5,000 words is typically a short story. But it is something, isn't it? Like trying to force it, and that limitation sometimes can be beneficial. We find like it forces you to drill down into the concept a little bit more. But I think invariably they would need to be plumped up, wouldn't they? But in this case, potentially not, because that felt like you did manage to get it all into 1,500, which is
it is all there.
Yeah,
I think so. I mean, one of the things I did lose was sort of in like the first draft, at least not even a full draft, kind of the first draft of the first half. There was more dialogue, but then I found that if I was going to stick to a word limit, that actually reporting the dialogue made it a lot quicker than actually having the conversations. So that's I suspect why I ended up doing that a lot in the second half. There's a lot of reporting of what people said to him and what he said and all this kind of stuff, rather than actually having the dialogue just as a word-saving technique more than anything else.
Yeah, that reporting the dialogue, that's a really good way of putting it. That is something that is necessary. Yeah, I wonder how many of those other kind of like shorthand versions of things that we've had to necessarily adopt, but not formally. Over the years that we've been writing for this, Nico. But yeah, that's a really good observation.
Also, Patrick passes the slightly supernatural story trope as a survivor for leaving the room the first time it happened, instead of saying, "I must closely inspect this spectral visitor."
I was kind of trying to do an intentional thing as well, which is partly where the kind of description of the hotel and stuff came in at the beginning of the first half. I was trying to very much follow a standard kind of ghost story trope. So I'm almost describing like the haunted hotel, and then there's the haunted room, and he has to go down the long corridors to get there, and then he sees the ghost and screams, and that was all kind of like the horror trope. And then the second half, I hope, at least what I was aiming for, was to try and kind of then twist it a bit and say, okay, well, instead of going there, maybe it's not that it's a haunted room. Maybe we go somewhere else with it and took it off in a slightly different direction, which I was kind of pleased with that in the end. I think that kind of came out a bit.
I'd agree. I made some notes about the Spectrum Park Hotel when you were introducing it at the start, and those kind of like liminal, like they are private, but they're also kind of public places that don't receive any kind of proper love and care because nobody really owns them. Like nobody feels ownership for them, even the people that work there. And you said like it could have been a school, it could have been a retirement home. It's like it felt very well captured very quickly, and I really liked the bit with the glass tunnel and the weed strangled lawn. I thought that was some of that. I mentioned this kind of observed little details. That was a big part of that one, I think. But I didn't get like a Shining vibe from it or anything like that. I think you.
Yeah, it was more of a. Yeah. I mean, some like old kind of rundown, like almost like travel lodge type hotels are far more creepy than any Overlook hotel would ever be. I think, in all honesty.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, that was really good. Thank you for telling that story. Yeah,
thank you.
That does leave only one person to tell a tale about.
It does. Well, I'm more than happy to. Let's see how we go. Linen. The little man was late, and the gap had shrunk too small for any of the elders to fetch him back. For all their strength, the lumberjacks and prospectors could not pry the gap wider. For all their dexterity, the blast girls and tunnel scouts couldn't contort through it. All the folk who called the settlement by the Gap their home found themselves waiting and watching, hoping for a glimpse of the little man. Out there at the edge of the world, it was easy to become obsessed by the wall. Impossible in scale, but rough and real to the touch, that mighty edifice stretched up until up ended, splitting the world in two. No one knew why God had built it, or why she saw fit to enchant it, but everyone knew that on the longest day of the year, the Gap opened. Beginning at dawn, it yawned until it was wide enough that 4 horses could be ridden abreast through it. Noon marked that widest point, and as the day declined, the Gap began to shrink. In the perishing light of dusk, it would squeeze the shoulders of an adult man. There were cautionary tales told and retold around campfires of the reasons why some poor souls had risked being crushed crossing the Gap too late in the day. Each story had only one ending: dry, dark stains left to mark their graves the following summer, as there was nothing left to bury. Those stories ensured that no one had been foolish enough to do it in recent memory. The people on the other side were just that, people. They were the same in every way, aside from living over there. The other sider's land, the little man said, was rich in sweeping plains of fertile earth, in which any plant could be sown and thrive. The folk of his side of the Gap, meanwhile, dug their wealth from hard ground poisoned with veins of gold, copper, and iron. The little man had been the first to formalize the trade of gold for the other sider's linen. His mind, regardless of his stature, was venerated by the folk of his side for that reason. That soft and light fabric was worth its weight, and every year the linen bonanza would bring a surge of commerce to the Gap as people traded what they could for that rare other side of fabric. Some chose to go through and stay there, a choice widely denounced, as most felt there must be a reason for which side of the wall God had placed them on. Just as the minds of those watching began to churn on the question of whether or not the little man had forsaken God and chosen to stay behind, a blast girl, despite the ringing in her ears which came with her profession, heard the scrape of someone struggling to come through. At her shout, many faces crowded the diminishing slit, peering into the dim shadows. Within the dark, they spied a grey shape scraping sideways. "Come on, little man! Just a bit further!" A broad prospector, wearing a layer of mine dust like a suit, reached in. Others joined him, and there was soon a thicket of hands grasping in the dark of the closing gap. "Come on," whispered the blast girl as she watched through squinted eyes. "Come on." "I've got him!" cried the broad prospector. They heaved the little man clear moments before the sun fell off the horizon, and the gap ground shut with a noise like someone gargling chips of stone. The little man lay panting, having been squeezed and unable to breathe for the last portion of his crossing. His fine linen suit, expertly tailored for his stature, was torn at the knees, elbows, and shoulders, marking where the gap had tried to claim him. His long golden hair, which hung below his waist, was laden with the sweat of panic. Strands of it had matted into his bushy beard. The blast girl fetched him some brackish water and handed it to him reverentially. He splashed some on his face, smoothed his hair back with damp hands, and then drank off the rest before speaking up to the concerned crowd. "I was delayed by the outsider elders. They've turned from God's even split," he began, "and say that next year the price of linen will double. They say they don't need our metals, furs, and fuels. They say they have what they need." Groans of woe swept the crowd. "But that's all we've got, all we were given by God," said the blast girl, crestfallen. "I've got a plan. I've studied their ways, and whilst our earth is less than arable, I think we can make a go of it with these." The little man held up a linen bag, itself worth a handful of gold, and shook it. The quiet rattle of seeds within were a promise of hope. "Flax seeds, irrigation techniques, and fertilizer know-how. With this, we can grow our own. Isn't that against the will of the wall, for us to farm? Asked the broad prospector. What will? Said the little man, passion flaring in his eyes. The will we imagine to make sense of us being divided into the haves and have-nots, to accept that they are the lucky ones that toil above the ground, whilst we scratch for shiny things in the dark. He waddled imperiously about the inner circle of the crowd. The other siders think of us as a dirty people who pollute their society with greed and fumes. They say that before they permitted trade, we were barely more than naked savages, swaddled in stinking furs and leather. What choice do we have when we're faced with their scorn? Will you allow God to make you lesser? I may be small, but I'll never be told I'm less than what I am. Not by them, and not by any god that would be so silently cruel. The crowd was stunned, their minds unable to contort enough to see his point of view. The blast girl broke the silence. But the wall is proof of God. And God wants us... The little man interrupted, anger replacing passion in his voice. Fuck God! We should live the lives we choose, without being cowed by segregation and kept humble by lack. Linen, it's just fabric. Let us better our circumstances and leave God in the past. They hanged the little man from the limb of a nearby pine, and the next year they paid double.
That was a wicked concept.
Thank you.
Love the ending as well.
Not too abrupt.
No, just right. Get in and get out.
No, I feel you should add an additional sentence. The really, really good description of everything on their side of the wall, while keeping the other side so sort of delightfully vague. It gave the real feeling of being someone from this miner's side. That the other side sound, it's that the grass is always greener, but given a very real feeling. The sense of how sort of grim their lives were, and how wondrous the other side felt when it was, all it was that they've got crops and irrigation. It really gave life to that world for me. That really worked.
Thank you.
Yeah, I made a note as well that I felt you kind of created the world very deftly. There's only kind of a few small little strokes, partly just naming them by kind of their job or what they did, or the little man in his case. But, that in itself just helped build this image of what their world was like and what their world consisted of, just in very little. It was just like, in odd names here and there, just gave us a sense of what their existence was, which I thought was wonderful.
I want to play a blast girl in an RP. I feel like that. I feel like that's something I would thoroughly enjoy.
Yeah. No, that's all very, very kind. Thank you. I wanted it started with the little man because I felt like it would be really interesting to build a society where somebody with dwarfism would be venerated. Like, it would be important that they could go through like a smaller space.
Yeah.
And I'm not entirely sure that was fully executed as well. I think I got a bit more absorbed by the imbalance between the two societies and things like that. But it did start with this idea of the culture needing this guy. But yeah, I don't know how you thought it was deployed, because you need to be sensitive about these kind of things, don't you? So I want to make it did sort of land roughly how I was intending it.
I think that would have shown more if it was described that the gap went from the ground up and then came back down. Because someone who was extremely slender could also have done.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really.
But it was still, those last moments when the gap was too small for everyone else, and then almost too small even for him. And got the description of just them finding the dry stains the next year, because nothing could possibly have survived being within the wall. That was horrible, but in the best possible way.
Yeah.
I made a note of two kind of paired lines in the first half and the second half. So in the first half, you had linen bonanza, which is a phrase. I love the phrase linen bonanza. Yeah, this possibly should be the title of this episode of the podcast, I think. And then in the second half, you had linen is just fabric, which which I thought was a lovely counterpoint to the linen bonanza of the first half.
Well, I love all these. You get these sort of little historical anecdotes of people just getting obsessed by something that we now deem to be quite mundane and ordinary.
Yeah.
Like I can't think of any to hand, but like things like French lace, for example. You know,
Yes.
like, it would like sweep the nation. This
Well,
craze.
there was famously the tulip fever, wasn't there, where everyone went absolutely bonkers for tulips. And I love the fact as well that in Victorian Britain, that people used to keep pineapples on their mantelpieces just as like showpieces because they looked fancy. You used to be able to rent a pineapple. You could go and rent a pineapple to have it in your living room for a day or two if you were having important guests around.
My understanding is that tulip craze that you mentioned actually precipitated one of the first like known stock market crashes. Because the flower market crashed in the Netherlands, didn't it? Because of the bubble sort of burst on the tulip game.
Which actually, it brings me to a lovely segue, actually, because I have written a question down, which is whether this was inspired by Trump's tariffs at all.
Well, that's really interesting. I definitely do get inspired by stuff like that. I wrote a story a few episodes ago now about a priest having to deal with a port having been locked down over during a trade war. Mm-hmm. And it was a fairly pointless trade war. So I feel like I got it out of my system a little bit then. So I don't think I had that continuing into this, but it's entirely possible. It's entirely possible. This idea of just like nonsense happening that obstructs everyday people's lives really bothers me. And obviously in this, it's also strengthened in a fairly horrible way by this mindless belief in an entity. So yeah, there were a few things going on there, but potentially a little bit of Trump's nonsense happening. Yeah,
there's something really poignant as well. It shows beautifully at the end when he tries to incite them to. It's not even to violence, to sort of self-imposed liberation, and the idea of turning against the figurehead of God is too much, and they just end him. Yeah. But that these people who are big, strong people and people who specialize in explosions and they rip out mountains, and it's never occurred to them to try and do that to the wall. It's that is a really interesting way to look at what the sort of oppression of religion does to people. I thought that was really well observed.
Thank you. I think there was a bit that I cut, which was to do with them having once tried to mine under it and just found that it goes all the way down, essentially. But it didn't really add much to the story. So yeah, I just sort of took it out. But yeah, it's a good point that they don't try and blast the wall at all. For sure. I'm also quite intrigued, again, from a historical perspective, of firebrands that are just a little bit too early, like thinkers that are men out of time or women out of time, and come a cropper of it, essentially. There's a whole bunch of very early Protestant reformers, for example, who just caught it at just the wrong time and ended up at the stake.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think I had a bit of that going through my head, these kind of this little man emerges in this society, tries to pull it along, goes a bit too far, and the history of the period is what gets him, really, the fact that thinking hasn't moved as fast as his mind has. There's something really horrible about that, I think. Yeah. And there's a deep fear that I feel for people that are also firebrands, right now, that kind of thing could happen for them as well. Yeah. I enjoyed writing this one.
I loved the description of him, by the way, with his linen suit cut to his size and his long golden hair. He was quite a character. I liked him a lot.
Yeah, I wanted him to be a real Don,
It was his long golden hair laden with the sweat of panic. I made a note of that line. I liked. I don't know. I felt the whole world felt slightly. I don't want to say grubby because grubby sounds mean, but it sounded quite kind of rough and, like you said, in a way not ready for what he was bringing. And that's why one of the reasons why I love the ending so much. And I thought you delivered the ending perfectly, and you built up his enormously long eulogizing speech, which made a lot of sense, and to a modern ear was put kind of tone perfect. Only for it then to just all be cut down at the end.
Yeah.
Only for them to go, nah, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
He also then got handed a cup of brackish water, which is only 2 words, but it made me go, oh, just the thought of, someone hand you a cup of water and it just looking gross. Oh, no. Dirty water, horrid.
That grubby is potentially the right word, I think. Like,
Yeah.
it definitely it is a frontier of sorts. I think there was a bit of that going through my head as well. I did imagine that they all had like slightly dirty faces, like like the guy that's covered in mine dust, for example. But yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks for the feedback. Is there anything you'd like cut out? Anything that you'd change?
I don't know, to be honest. I think definitely not the ending. I think the ending needs to stay exactly as it is. Potentially just the world building coming in. I guess that anything you can do to clarify the world even more is good. But I mean, it was kind of there, to be honest. I got a really good image of it. I don't feel like I wouldn't want to overdo it. I wouldn't want to describe too much kind of what's on the other side of the wall and stuff, because I think that would just undermine the effect that you've created.
Cool. Thank you. Well, that was delightful. I think 3 very different approaches, which is always nice.
A linen bonanza.
A linen bonanza, yeah. Which is the technical term, apparently. I was looking up like prospecting terms. Apparently, if you do strike like a rich vein of gold, it is called a bonanza. Which is
that was the name of the old TV series, wasn't it? That's why the TV series Bonanza.
Was it? Bonanza. I've never encountered it. I'm vaguely aware that there was a show called Bonanza, but I've got.
You're probably not quite old enough. You see, I've got just enough years on you two to be able to remember reruns of Bonanza on a Sunday afternoon.
Gosh, so I've rediscovered the term, and I think it's a wicked word. So I'm glad that you picked up on it as well. But yeah, Linen Bonanza, that was really good. I loved the sort of the emotional maturity and the loving portrait of this old woman that you supplied, Nico. And Dan, that just as I said there, like the elegance with which you built that world and ramped it into realms of like poetic brilliance, I think, was just delightful. Gosh, what a time! What a time! So I think at this point it might be an idea for people listening, Dan, to just get a sense of any projects you've got coming out that they could pre-order, and like maybe where they can like follow you on social media and things like that.
Yeah, so finding me online, probably the easiest is my website, which is just dancoxon.com. There is a newsletter on there, which I'm trying to be slightly better about doing. It's supposed to be monthly, but it's kind of whenever I remember, which is about every 2 or 3 months at the moment. I am on Instagram as well, which is, I think, dan.coxon.horror, or on Blue Sky as Dan Coxon. In terms of projects, the thing that's coming up in fact, there's 2 things coming up on the horizon. So at the end of September, I have Writing the Magic coming out with Dead Ink Books, which I co-edited with Richard Hurst, which is the 4th book in our writing series, after Writing the Uncanny, Writing the Future, and Writing the Murder. And it is specifically about writing fantasy fiction. And it's a collection of essays on writing fantasy fiction. The wonderful R.J. Barker, who I know is a friend of the podcast, has a great essay in there, but also a whole bunch of other fantastic writers. Really, really proud of it. That's on the Dead Ink website now, as is my other book that's coming up, which is at the end of October, so 1 month later. I have an anthology of haunted house stories coming out called Unquiet Guests, which is probably why I lean towards a haunted house story for my story today. But that has Chuck Palahniuk, which I'm very excited about. The fact we've got Chuck Palahniuk. And they're really excited about this. It's got Grady Hendrix as well, Kirsty Logan, and it's a fantastic anthology. We're doing it as a kind of a thing for Halloween, knocking into Christmas, kind of ghost stories, haunted house stories. So that's what's on the horizon for me, and lots of touring for some reason. I seem to be doing like every festival under the sun and every convention under the sun for the next 2 months. So if anyone's out there,
is it like you're doing like talks and this kind of thing?
yeah. So I mean, like a lot of people, I'll be down at the World Fantasy Convention / British Fantasy Con, but I'm also doing Edgelit. We've got a panel, and I'm teaching a workshop. We've got MCM Comic Con. I'm doing a 1-to-1 kind of workshop thing and another panel about writing the magic. We have some Waterstones events coming up. There's lots coming up. Probably just subscribe to my newsletter because I haven't even quite got my own head around it all yet. Edgelit's probably the big one. Edgelit and World Fantasy Con and MCM Comic Con. We're doing those 3 and then maybe having a bit of a lie down.
Good idea.
It sounds like you lot have got some books to go and pre-order and some tickets to buy, and we'll see you in a week where we shall ask some unbearably complex questions of Dan Coxon.
Lie.
I shall look forward to it.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?